Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the most comprehensive Hindu analysis on YouTube. So let's begin today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 9 important articles for a detailed and comprehensive analysis. The idea is to ensure that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. Now, before we start the discussion, I have a very important announcement. If you're preparing for 2026 or 2027 for UPSC Civil Services examination, you have a great opportunity to enroll in Unacademy's online classroom program. Right now, you can avail the classroom program at just 19,999 with up to 12 months of free extension. And this will give you access to all the free recorded live lectures that we have, along with the study material, the test series, the mentorship and doubt resolution sessions. On the subscription page, you might see a different price, but to avail the offer, you have to enter the code IAS English. And what is really important is that I'm told by Unacademy that the offer ends today. Because starting tomorrow, this price would be 24,999. So if you want to avail the offer and enroll for our program at 19,999, today would be the last day, as we have been informed by Unacademy. So those interested can click on the link provided in the video description. And if you want the PDF of the session, please scan the QR code on your screen. After the session ends, I'll be sharing the PDF over here. So let's get started and look at the first article. On page number 9, the Hindu carries an important article related to Indian polity. This article focuses on the topic of legal aid. It explores the availability of free legal aid in India and whether justice and equity is really being upheld in the country. Because if you look at the Indian Constitution, under Article 39A, which is part of the DPSPs, the Directive Principles of State Policy, the state is mandated by the Constitution to provide for free legal aid, especially to the poor sections of the country, to those who are underprivileged, those who can't afford legal aid to represent themselves, to fight for justice. The Constitution directs the state to provide for free legal aid. So this provision was added through the 42nd Constitution Amendment Act. And the spirit behind this provision is to ensure that there is equal access to justice. Justice should never be denied on the grounds of affordability. Just because you can't afford an expensive lawyer, right? You should not be denied access to your legal rights and the right to represent and defend yourself in case of litigations. So the Constitution directs the state to provide for free legal aid under Article 39A. And to fulfill this objective, the Parliament has enacted the Legal Services Authorities Act in 1987. So legal service institutions are set up, and at the national and state level, we have authorities such as the NALSA, the National Legal Services Authority, and at the state level, we have the State Legal Service Authorities. So these statutory institutions that are set up under the law, they are mandated to deliver free legal aid across the country. Their primary role and responsibility is to reach every nook and corner in the country and ensure that defendants, litigants, even those who are accused, those who are convicted of crimes, they have access to free legal aid. So according to a report, the India Justice Report 2025, roughly in India there is one legal service clinic for every 163 villages. So in terms of coverage, this is not very bad. Approximately on an average for every 163 villages in the country, there is at least one legal service clinic that is available where free legal aid can be availed by India's almost 80% of our population, which may not be able to afford legal aid, because as you know, getting the support of lawyers might be quite expensive, and a large percentage of our population may not be able to afford the legal support that they need. So these legal service centers, which are set up through the country with funding and resources from NALSA and the State Legal Services Authority, this helps in delivering the free legal aid which is needed for the underprivileged sections. Now, if you look at the budgetary allocation, because delivering free legal aid is entirely dependent on the budget and resources which is provided to NALSA and the state legal services authorities. If you look at the total budget that is assigned to legal aid, it's just 1% of the total justice budget. If you look at the total justice budget, that includes the budget for prisons, judiciary, then police, and legal aid, and combine the entire budget and take that as a parameter to measure the allocation for legal aid budget, this accounts for just 1% of the total justice budget in the country, which means the financial allocation is pretty low. It's relatively low. So both central and state governments are responsible for financing the legal service authorities. The center provides funds for NALSA, which distributes them to the state legal services authorities, and the states have a role in contributing to the state legal service authorities as well. Now, if you look at the last, let's say, 6 to 7 years, we have seen a significant jump in the budgetary spending. But the problem is the overall quantum of allocation is not sufficient. Let's say in 2018, the budgetary allocation combined for NALSA and the state legal service authorities was roughly around 600 crores. Now, this has jumped to around 1050 crores approximately. So close to, you can say, 100% jump in the allocation, close to, right? But this is way below the requirement, because when you're spending hardly 1% of the entire justice budget on legal aid, and even this entire amount is not being utilized, it's not being spent on delivery of free legal aid. Some of it has been wasted as well by the legal service clinics and the legal service authorities. So there is an urgent need to step up funding, to provide more resources, to ensure that legal aid becomes universally accessible. So these are the two problem statements: the lack of funding, the lack of resources. Studies have shown that even this limited funds which is made available to the legal service authorities, a large part of it is spent on unnecessary expenses like vehicles, transportation, sometimes even on food. Some legal service authorities have even conducted tree plantation initiatives. Though it is a noble initiative, but what's the point? The whole mandate of these institutions is to deliver free legal aid. And first of all, they have a limited budget. Though there has been a slight jump in recent years, it's still not sufficient. So whatever money is available, whatever resources are provided, it should be entirely channeled towards delivering legal aid alone and nothing else. So that's why the government has laid down guidelines, clear guidelines right now, that there will be no unnecessary expenses from legal aid budget. No wasteful expenditure, which has been seen in the past. See, in the last 6 years especially, state governments have really stepped up their financial allocation. Some states like Karnataka, Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, they have been doing much better. They've almost provided 100% rise in the budgetary allocation for free legal aid. They've doubled the budgetary allocation. But what is concerning is the allocation by central government has declined. The center was allocating roughly around 200 plus crores to NALSA. Now this has come down to just around 160, 170 crores. So the remaining 800, 900 crores is coming from state governments. And some states have really stepped up the budgetary allocation. So in total, the country's spending is roughly around 1000 crores. This combines both center and state spending. Now, out of that, if there are wasteful expenditures happening, if the budget is not fully being utilized by the legal service authorities, then that is a big disservice. Right? It goes against the very spirit of the Constitution and the directive principles of state policy as well. So that's why the government has brought out clear guidelines, placing ceilings and caps for the spending and the expenditure limits. So the funds which are allocated to the legal service authorities will have to be spent entirely on delivering legal aid, spreading awareness amongst the people, and also promoting alternate dispute resolution. Apart from this, the funds cannot be used for anything else. So, this is a positive step because it minimizes the wastage, improves utilization of funds, and it will deliver the required results. Because many people, especially in rural areas, amongst the poor sections, may not even be aware that free legal aid is available to them. So, spreading awareness is important that the people can approach the legal service clinics which are set up in different parts of the country. They can secure free legal support. They should be aware of alternate mechanisms of dispute resolution like arbitration, mediation, because litigation route is time consuming and expensive and quite hostile as well. So alternate dispute routes also should need to be explored and promoted. So some funds can be spent on promoting alternate dispute resolution techniques. And the rest of it has to be used only for the legal aid expenses, meaning paying the lawyers who are delivering these services, ensuring that the required support is needed provided to the litigants. And right now, these guidelines are helping in better utilization and effective spending of the limited budget which is given to legal services in the country. Now, what is really concerning is that when it comes to legal aid, we have these paralegal volunteers. These paralegal volunteers, they act as the first line of delivering legal aid in our country. Who are these paralegal volunteers? They are essentially community members who are trained. They're not professional lawyers per se, but they have a basic understanding of the litigation process, the documentation that is needed. They are trained by the legal community at the local level. So they will be in touch with the litigants, with the people at the grassroots level. So they will help them access these legal aid centers which are available. They will help them in the documentation process. They will guide them on how to approach courts. They will guide them about alternate dispute resolution methods that are available. So such services are provided by the paralegal volunteers. So their role is critical. There are thousands of paralegal volunteers who are trained at the community level. They bridge the gap between the litigants and the lawyers, because lawyers themselves will not be able to provide that kind of support at the grassroots level. Lawyers might be able to take up the cases, fight these cases in court, but spreading awareness, providing that basic support at the starting level, helping in documentation, for example, that is not something lawyers would be able to do. So that's why an entire community has been created at the grassroots level where paralegal volunteers have been trained. But the problem, the real irony here is that they are not paid a good honorarium. The payment which is made to them by the government is very, very minuscule amount which is given to them. Kerala at least is slightly better. In state of Kerala, around 750 rupees per day is given to paralegal volunteers. But there are states like Gujarat where the payment is hardly 250 rupees per day. So this will not even cover the basic expenses in a day. So paralegal volunteers have lost motivation and they are the backbone of this entire system. They are the frontline responders. They are the first line, essentially, providing that legal support and assistance to the litigants. So they are not being actively supported. They are not getting right payments. In many states, the honorarium amount they receive is below the minimum wages. So this has been a basic challenge. So that is why the article is urging the government to step up funding and resources for legal services authorities in the country so that there can be better delivery of free legal aid. See, in this regard, we must praise one initiative of the government. In 2022, the government has launched an initiative through NALSA. NALSA has launched the LADC, Legal Aid Defense Council. It's a central sector scheme which is entirely funded by the central government through NALSA funds. And this initiative provides legal support for the defendants, for those who are accused, even those who are convicted of crimes. A dedicated scheme has been launched. In fact, you find such initiatives in other countries. For example, in the United States, you have the Public Defenders Act, where lawyers provide that kind of legal support for those who are standing in defense, even in criminal cases. So NALSA has launched a new central sector scheme in 2022, the LADC, Legal Aid Defense Council. Through this initiative, free legal aid is being provided to the defendants in a case, the accused and the convicts in criminal cases. And that is a step forward. So something like this has to be done. More funding has to be provided to these national and state level legal service authorities. And at the grassroots level, paralegal volunteers have to be, compensated. And legal service clinics have to be further spread out across the country so that free legal aid truly becomes accessible in each and every corner of the country and for each and every section of the society. So this is very crucial to ensure that access to justice is maintained, that equity is maintained when it comes to securing justice. Because securing justice should not be a matter of affordability. Just because you can't afford expensive lawyers, you should not be denied justice. That is the entire spirit of this constitutional provision as well. Because true justice is done only when the poorest person in the country will be able to represent themselves and defend their rights and secure justice through the justice system. And to ensure that free legal aid is absolutely critical. So let's take a look at this mains practice question based on what we have discussed. Discuss the constitutional provision on free legal aid and its significance. That's the first part of your question. Has India been able to deliver on its commitment? Examine. So that's the second part of the question. So you can start your answer with an introduction talking about Article 39A. Explain the significance, the relevance of free legal aid. Point out that it's a part of DPSP. And explain why this is critical to secure justice. Making justice affordable is absolutely essential. So try to bring that out, bring that argument in the introduction itself. So in the first part, you will just talk about the constitutional provision, why free legal aid is extremely important to secure justice. So once you set the tone for your answer in the body, you can discuss about the Legal Services Authorities Act 1987. Talk about the legal framework which has been created to deliver on this directive principle, and discuss the institutional framework, the establishment of NALSA, the National Legal Service Authority, and the state level legal service authorities, and how at the grassroots level legal service clinics are catering at the village level, how paralegal volunteers are providing the frontline assistance. So try to map out the institutional framework which has been created. Present some data as well to back up your argument. The data that we were discussing, try to bring that into the equation over here. And then start discussing the challenges and problems. Talk about the lack of funding, the lack of resources, how even available funds and resources have been underutilized or they have been spent on unnecessary expenses. So discuss how the government is trying to curtail the unnecessary expenditure, why there is a need to increase the expenditure and allocation of resources, and talk about schemes such as LADC, the Central Sector Scheme, through which dedicated support is being provided in legal defense, and then conclude your answer. So basically, you're highlighting the problems and challenges as well. You're evaluating India's performance on this constitutional commitment and presenting a way forward as well. So this makes for a good answer. So try to use the structure that we have discussed and try to write an answer based on this. Now let's look at the next article. On the supplement page where the science and tech articles are published in the Hindu, there's a very important and interesting article on the role of mangrove forests. How mangrove cover can enhance India's coastal security. So let's talk about this in slight detail because this is a very, very important topic under environment and ecology. See, mangrove forests, they are extremely biodiverse. They offer numerous benefits. They provide economic benefits. They provide social benefits. They provide recreational benefits as well. It's a very biodiverse region that's present in an ecotone. You know what's an ecotone? An ecotone is a transition area between two ecosystems. So when a terrestrial ecosystem is transitioning into a coastal marine ecosystem, right? In between the two ecosystems, you have a transitional ecosystem, which is called an ecotone. So in the case of a terrestrial ecosystem transitioning into a coastal marine ecosystem, the transition area would be dominated by wetlands. You will come across estuaries, deltas, lagoons. So these are the ecotone areas, the transitional ecosystems between the territorial landmass and the coastal marine ecosystem on the other side. So one dominant feature of such a ecotone is that it's characterized by wetland vegetation and geographical composition, meaning there is constant logging of water as rivers drain into the seas and the oceans. Right at the mouth of the river, it leaves behind these backwaters, delta formations, lagoons, and estuaries. And very harsh conditions are actually present here sometimes. When there is constant water logging, right, and also constant mixing of fresh water with seawater, the fresh water coming from the rivers is constantly mixing with the seawater as well, which is brought in through the tides. So, in such a ecotone, in these coastal wetlands, so you find very challenging, very harsh conditions to be present. There is very high salinity, very low oxygen that is available. Even the soil structure would be very weak. It can't really support heavier trees and forested vegetation, right? Because the soil itself is weaker, and it's very hard for forested, dense trees to grow in such areas. So, despite all these challenges present, right, there are environmental, climatic challenges present. Mangroves, they thrive in these ecotones. You can see in the picture here how a dense forested vegetation can thrive in a wetland, in a transition area where the land is meeting the sea. In this transition area, a dense forested vegetation can come up, and it's all because of the mangrove trees that thrive and grow in such harsh conditions. A mangrove is essentially considered as a master of adaptation. It's able to thrive in those harsh conditions because it has gone through a lot of adaptations, which makes it extremely resilient for changes. It can withstand disruptions really well. Because through the course of evolution, mangroves have displayed one of the best possible adaptations, which allows them to thrive, not just survive, even in such harsh, inhospitable conditions. These mangrove trees, they have a very unique adaptation called pneumatophores, where the roots, they prop up outside the surface of the water, these nodules like structure that you can see here in the image, which is which is essentially capable of absorbing oxygen from the atmosphere, as the condition below the water is almost anaerobic, very low oxygen condition, right? The root essentially props right up in a vertical direction, props out of the surface of the water, almost like a snorkel, right? That people, the swimmers, use for snorkeling. And it's able to take in oxygen directly from the atmosphere itself. So this allows for the respiration activities to continue. So it's a very unique adaptation seen in mangroves. And when there is constant water logging, I told you, right, there's no mechanical support. The soil is not strong enough to support heavier trees. It's very weak. So, to ensure that these dense wooded trees can grow and flourish, the mangroves have developed stilt roots. They've developed their own crutches. So, there are these roots that break out from the stem and the branches that gives horizontal support to the mangrove tree, because the roots at the bottom alone is not enough to take the weight and provide balance to the tree, because the soil below is always logged with water, right? It is mushy and and it is essentially a clayey soil. So it's not able to withstand the entire weight, and mechanical support is not there. So the tree itself develops these horizontal roots that break away from the stems and branches and drops down to provide stilted support to the tree. So this again is a very unique adaptation. So the mangrove tree is essentially adapted for the harsh conditions present over here. To deal with high salinity, mangroves have a unique filtration mechanism in the roots to prevent excess salt from being absorbed. They even have a salt removal system. Any excess salt is very efficiently removed as well through the excretory system. The leaves are very thick and waxy to protect them from the high saline condition, and they can thrive in an anaerobic environment as well. Even under such low oxygen conditions, they can thrive. And these adaptations have made mangroves the masters of the coastline. And they play a critical role as far as the local ecosystem, the health of the environment, the biodiversity is concerned. They deliver a number of important services. They provide for important biodiversity services because these mangrove forests, they are home to several species of flora and fauna. Now take the Sundarbans, for example, right, in West Bengal, one of the richest mangrove ecosystem in our country. It's home to the Bengal tiger, correct? Then a variety of fishes, mollusks, and crustaceans can thrive in this ecosystem. And this becomes a lucrative economic opportunity as well for aquaculture and aqua farming for the local fishing community. So this generates livelihood opportunities, income opportunities are created by the mangrove forests through aquaculture, then even through honey cultivation. Mangrove trees are perfectly suited for honey cultivation as well. Then shellfish, prawn cultivation is very common, right? Because in these closed pools of water, the fishing communities can easily carry out aquaculture, and commercially, valuable seafood can be cultivated, which brings sufficient income for the coastal communities. And also, mangroves are believed to have medicinal cosmetic properties. They have a lot of commercial value in the pharmaceutical and cosmetic industry as well. So this provides for livelihood and income support for the coastal communities and fishing communities. It plays a critical role in the biodiversity as well. And it helps in tackling pollution. They're like natural filters present on the coastline. They're able to treat the water, remove some of the effluents, the toxic effluents as it flows into the sea. They can even hold back some of the plastic waste which our rivers are carrying directly into the sea. But the same pollution can be detrimental to the health of mangroves as well. Is that clear? But more importantly, mangroves act as a natural buffer. It acts as the first line of defense against natural disasters, especially against a cyclone. Imagine there is a severe cyclonic formation that is bringing high speed winds and torrential rainfall and coastal surge. This can be arrested, right? The speed of the winds, the coastal tidal activity can be arrested by the mangrove cover which is present. It acts as a natural barrier, a natural buffer, as a first line of defense. Take the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. Mangroves played a critical role in coastal Tamil Nadu, in Andaman Nicobar Islands, which were badly hit by the tsunami. In areas where mangrove cover was present, it was able to better absorb the impact and minimize the losses for the coastal communities. So since the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, India has truly understood the role and importance of the mangrove forests. In the past, there has been a lot of destruction of mangrove cover in our country. The Forest Survey of India's report on the forest cover in the country has shown a decline in previous years, where mangroves were destroyed because of expansion of urban areas, industrialization, and extensive pollution, and even climate change. All these factors had contributed to the decline of the mangrove cover. Deforestation, pollution, overexploitation. But over the last 2 decades, India has carried out a big turnaround in conservation, and today we have managed to increase the mangrove cover in the country. There is a significant jump in India's mangrove cover, and the data is clearly pointing towards this success. Now, if you look at India's coastline from Gujarat till West Bengal on the mainland of India, even in our island territories like Andaman Nicobar, mangrove cover is found extensively. Especially states like Gujarat, West Bengal have the highest cover. Then even Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, Goa, parts of Karnataka, parts of Kerala, Andhra Pradesh as well, right? They do have a very good mangrove cover. Now, for example, if you take the mangroves in Tamil Nadu and Puducherry, right, they have a lot of tourism value as well. It provides recreational services, promotes coastal and aqua tourism, which in turn generates income and livelihood opportunities for local communities. Right? That's also another advantage. And also, don't forget, these wetlands, they are a great carbon sink. Mangrove forests, when they are present in these wetland, coastal wetland ecosystems, they are super efficient in capturing blue carbon. Blue carbon is basically the carbon which is sequestered by coastal and marine ecosystems. When coastal marine ecosystems, they absorb the excess carbon in the atmosphere and lock and store away the carbon for a long time. This often is referred to as blue carbon. So mangrove forests and these coastal wetlands are very, very efficient in carbon sequestration, and they help in tackling climate change. So it's all the more important to protect the mangroves. For example, states like Tamil Nadu have done very well in the last 20 years through investments in local initiatives. Tamil Nadu has more than doubled its mangrove cover. It had around 4,500 hectares of mangrove forests. Now it has doubled to 9,000 hectares. Across India, we have a total mangrove cover of roughly 4,900 square kilometers. This is the extent of India's mangrove cover. Gujarat has done phenomenally well in mangrove conservation, and it has substantially increased mangrove cover in the Kutch and Saurashtra region. Maharashtra, especially near Mumbai, a lot of urbanization projects are posing a threat to the creeks which are present near Mumbai and Thane. And environmental groups and civil society organizations are very proactive. They're working with the conservation groups to protect the mangroves from the impact of urbanization. So we are seeing several such initiatives across the country to protect and conserve the mangroves because they are essential for coastal security. They are critical for the environment and the ecosystem. They are critical for coastal communities. They act as a barrier against the impact of natural disasters, from cyclones to tsunamis. Right? They help in tackling climate change, and they deliver services, economic services to the local communities. So that is the reason why schemes like Mishti, which was launched by Government of India in 2023, in the 2023-24 budget, Government of India has announced a dedicated initiative for protecting the mangrove forests in India. Mangrove Initiative for Shoreline Habitats and Tangible Incomes. That's the expansion of this acronym. Right? MISHTI can be expanded. It's an acronym that stands for Mangrove Initiative for Shoreline Habitats and Tangible Incomes. Under this initiative, India has registered tremendous success in conservation of the mangrove cover, and we have substantially increased the mangrove forest cover in our country. So going forward, India will have to sustain these efforts. In fact, according to IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, mangrove conservation will single-handedly help in saving several species of flora and fauna. Mangroves play such an important role. It's almost like a critical species in the ecotone area of coastal wetlands. So that is what we take away from this important article. You understand the role of mangroves and coastal wetlands and its significance, and what initiatives does India have to conserve and protect them. Right? We also spoke about the distribution of mangroves in India. So using all this knowledge and information, you can easily answer any question on mangroves. So take down this practice question: restoring mangroves can turn the tide on India's coastal security. Comment. So don't get misled by the question. It's not just about India's physical security as such. It's about the environmental security. It's about protecting the biodiversity and ensuring the security of the coastal population on the coastlines. So based on what we have learned, please try to answer this question. Now let's look at another interesting article on page number 8. There's a column that focuses on the need for police reforms in India. The article highlights why brutal methods like torture will never work in investigation. See, this important article has been brought out by a retired IAS officer because recently there was a tragic incident in Tamil Nadu. In fact, I'd mentioned this in one of my previous sessions. We spoke about the incident involving Ajit Kumar, a young temple guard from a lower caste, who was accused of stealing from the temple, right? Who was arrested by the police, tortured in custody, beaten brutally, and eventually he was killed in custody. This tragic incident is just a reminder of the brutality of Indian police. According to data, there has been 687 cases of custodial deaths in a span of 5 to 6 years. Between 2018 to 2023, in roughly a span of 5 to 6 years, close to 700 custodial cases of deaths have been reported. Okay, let's say number is 600 to 700, right? Official data says it's around 687. So imagine every year, hundreds of people are being killed in custody by the police. They're being tortured to their death. And these are the reported cases. Unofficially, the numbers could be much, much higher. Experts believe the actual number could be 3-4 times higher than this. Is that clear? Because many cases of custodial death, custodial torture will not even get reported. Because usually custodial torture doesn't happen in police stations alone or in police lockups. They happen in these black sites or off-site locations away from police stations. And this raises the question of what is the right way of policing? What is the right way to investigate a case? What is the right way to interrogate a suspect and get required information and evidence? See, the writer here brings a contrast, a comparison between two different kinds of investigation. He compares Sherlock Holmes with Dirty Harry. I'm sure all of you must be familiar with Sherlock Holmes, but you may not know who Dirty Harry is. These are references to very popular fictional characters from Western pop media, right? Sherlock Holmes, I'm sure all of you are aware of his methods, how Sherlock Holmes resorts to uh, the science of deduction, right? He relies on evidence. He doesn't focus on torturing someone or forcing someone to give information, but collects information and evidence methodically through the application of a scientific process. On the other hand, you have Dirty Harry, again, a Western fictional character known for beating up the accused using brutal violence. So let's say you don't understand the reference. Now let's compare this with India's most popular fictional police characters, the so-called Singham franchisee, right? Though the movie series has done pretty well commercially, I think you can understand the popularity of these movies and characters is largely based on their usage of force, right? The way they are depicted in popular media, that somehow it creates an image amongst the public that a police officer is efficient only if they beat up the accused, only if they use brutal violence. This has become a norm, right? Now compare that with the techniques used by someone like Sherlock Holmes, right? And that's what the writer is bringing out. The writer makes a reference to characters like Dirty Harry, Sherlock Holmes. He makes references to various Netflix series as well, and establishes clearly that torture doesn't really work. It's not just about morality and ethics. It's about scientific investigation, solving the cases, getting hold of the actual convicts, holding them guilty, getting them punished in a court of law by building a foolproof case. Now, I would like to give the example of the 2006 Mumbai train bombings, which is in the news currently, right? Even today, there's an article in the Hindu as well related to the case. The 2006 Mumbai train bombing was one of the biggest terror attacks in India. 180 plus people were killed. The Mumbai police carried out the investigation. They arrested several accused, held them guilty, and tried to push their case for prosecution. And what happened? The Bombay High Court has acquitted all of them because the Mumbai police had done a shoddy job at investigation, pure incompetence, or even a possible disservice has been done, as most likely they might have got hold of several innocents who are not involved in the attack, and they've essentially stopped chasing the actual terrorists who carried out the attack. The Bombay High Court has exposed the flaws in the prosecution. For example, the confession statements which have been obtained from these accused, they are all exactly the same, verbatim. Each and every accused has given the exact same confession. How is it possible? That clearly shows the confession was doctored, fabricated by the police. Even the eyewitnesses they have brought in, especially taxi drivers, the statements they have given, the timeline of events which has been established by Mumbai police in case of this bombing incident, nothing falls into place. They have not built a watertight case. They don't have 100% solid proof, and hence the case has fallen apart. And of course, the Bombay High Court has acquitted all of them. And most of them might be innocent as well. They may not be even involved with these attacks. So imagine the pain, the torture they have faced, the families have faced, entire careers have been ruined. So there are many such cases and incidents which comes up. Police often tend to find the easier route. Right? There is a popular depiction that police who are more brutal are considered more popular and efficient. That is a mindset built by our popular movies and the fictional narrative as well. Right? Now compare that with proper scientific investigation. Well, there is no need to use force, no need to commit torture. For example, the United States also learnt a big lesson post 9/11 attacks. The CIA, right, when it launched a major global war on terrorism, it adopted enhanced interrogation techniques, absolutely brutal, inhuman methods to interrogate terror suspects, especially those linked with Al Qaeda who were picked up by the CIA. They were renditioned under the rendition program to CIA black sites around the world, where CIA operatives would brutally torture the suspects. They used techniques like waterboarding, right, which simulates that you're sinking and you're taking in water. It's a very brutal form of torture where it almost appears that you're going to die because of drowning. And there are many other stress methods which are used in CIA's interrogation techniques, where the accused is tied to a chair for long hours. They're not allowed to walk. They're kept in solitary confinement. They're not allowed to sleep, right? They blast music, very loud music, 24/7. Constant light is put up, very high intensity light, so that they can never sleep. So such brutal methods are used, and the CIA even later tried to justify it when it came out in the open. But the Senate findings, the US Senate, which has gone into the effectiveness of such enhanced interrogation techniques, has completely dismissed the validity of such interrogation methods. Because in most cases, the evidence that was obtained through such torture, whatever statements, confession was obtained, it was always false, because it's human tendency to lie when you're in pain to make the pain stop. There is a scientific basis for this. This is not just morality and ethics. There is a scientific argument here. A scientific study which was conducted on torture in the United Kingdom, it explored the neuroscience of torture. Will torture work to get the right information? Will it help in extracting the truth? That was the statement which was being addressed by this scientific study. And the researchers found out that when a person is tortured, when you're subjected to extreme pain and stress, your prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for your memory, for clarity, for vision of thought, and to recollect memories and provide the accounts, this part of your brain gets subdued. When pain takes over, prefrontal cortex and the hypothalamus, they essentially don't function to their appropriate level, meaning the person who's been subjected to such physical torture, they're not thinking straight. They will be disillusioned, right? They will be in a state of panic, in a survival mode, essentially. They can't recollect what really happened. And to make the pain stop, they will say anything which is needed, which means in most cases, it would be fabricated lies. So studies after studies have proved that torture is never effective. In 99% of the cases, torture will never get the right information which is useful. And if the police or intelligence agencies, if they start chasing the false leads, that's a waste of their resources as well. If they might get hold of others who are still innocents, because the confession given itself is false. The convict, the accused who was being tortured, would have lied just to make the pain stop. And if the police or the interrogators pursue that lead, arrest more people based on those lies, they will essentially violate the human rights of many more people. So it's a chain of cascading events that will get triggered, but the actual case will never get solved. The actual culprits will never get caught. So this is the point the writer is trying to raise over here. That torture is absolutely ineffective. This is something that should be done away with. Of course, torture is not legally allowed, but Indian police have inculcated this as a habit, and even Indian public have a liking for it, which is largely because of what image the media has cultivated. That police officers are brave and strong if they just beat up and torture the accused, right? But there is clear scientific basis for this argument that torture is never effective. In fact, if you build a rapport with the accused, talk to them, treat them with respect and dignity, you are able to get better information out of them. This reminds me of one case in Norway in 2011. There was a case of a mass shooting. An extremist, a right wing extremist, went on a shooting rampage. He killed 77 people. So the investigators in Norway, the interrogators, they got hold of the shooter. They could have beaten him up, tortured him because he had killed 77 innocents. But instead, right, they treated him with respect and dignity. They built a rapport with him, extracted a lot of information, which helped Norway's investigators to break up several radical terror modules. There have been lessons, similar lessons learned in US and United Kingdom as well. After a few terror attacks, when the interrogators from intelligence agencies and security services and police forces, when they have applied the method of building a rapport, treating the accused with respect, treating them with dignity, they have got more information from them, which is true, which is authentic. They've acted on it and they've disrupted and broken multiple terror modules, preventing future terror attacks. Whereas studies have clearly shown whenever torture has been used to extract information, 99% of it would be lies. It would not help one bit in prosecution. It will not help in the investigation as well. You will end up punishing the innocent, and the actual criminal will get away with the crime. So this is the biggest disservice the police can do, because their role is to secure justice. So torture is not the way out. So this is where India has to consider some important reforms. If you look at the DK Basu case of 1996, the Supreme Court has laid down clear guidelines to create safeguards in our policing system to prevent custodial torture from happening. For example, installation of cameras. This has been mandated by the Supreme Court. Any interrogation should be on camera as well. And once the accused is detained, they should be produced in front of the magistrate, and their physical well-being has to be ensured. All these safeguards, guidelines have been put down by the Supreme Court in DK Basu case, but it is not followed. It's violated blatantly by the police forces. The Law Commission of India, in its 273rd report in 2017, urged the Indian Parliament to bring out an anti-torture law. The Law Commission had recommended that India needs a dedicated law against torture, which holds the police forces accountable. But there is no such law in the country. There is no dedicated law, standalone legislation against torture. In the case Puttaswamy case, which was a landmark judgment in 2017, Supreme Court upheld right to privacy as a fundamental right under Article 21. In this judgment, the Supreme Court opined that bodily autonomy, dignity, is part of your fundamental rights under Article 21, which guarantees right to life. So this cannot be violated by the police under any circumstances, even if it's a terrorist who has killed 100 innocent people, right? There is no point and there is no basis to beat up and torture the accused. Instead, you have to adopt scientific methods of investigation and interrogation, solve the case, get hold of all the criminals who are involved, the terrorists who are involved, and secure punishment to them. That is how you do true justice, not through physical displays of violence and committing torture. Right? It might look glamorous on screen, where the heroes beat up the criminals and get information at the last minute and somehow prevent an attack in the last second. But real life is not like that. Real life requires hard work, persistent effort, and case studies have shown that torture is never effective, whereas treating the accused with respect and dignity helps in extracting better information, and that helps actually in securing justice. So this is where India should consider ratifying the UN Convention Against Torture. India is not party to it. Though India is a democratic nation, right? India is one of the few democracies in the world which has not ratified the UN Convention Against Torture. It's high time we take up this global obligation and maintain the commitment. And right now we are listed as a high risk country on the Global Torture Index. The Global Torture Index has ranked India as one of the high risk countries for custodial torture. So this is an image that India should try to correct. And police reforms is the only way out. Is that clear? So let's look at the next article. Donald Trump has announced a series of tariffs against India, including certain penalties against India. See, in April, Donald Trump had already announced Liberation Day tariffs, where the US had proposed to impose up to 26% tariffs on India's exports to the US. Both countries were busy negotiating a mini trade deal to avoid these tariffs from being imposed, as the US had placed a temporary pause on these tariffs. US had introduced a 10% universal tariff on all imports that applied for Indian imports as well. And in the meantime, we were negotiating a mini trade agreement, which was supposed to be worked out by end of July. But the trade deal is nowhere in place. India has not agreed to American demands. Obviously, we have to protect some of our core sectors, our sensitive sectors like agriculture and MSME sector, for example. So India has not given any concession, and the US has concluded that India's tariffs are essentially obnoxious. That's what Donald Trump tweeted and posted on social media. He called out India's tariffs as a barrier, as a trade barrier. Previously, is often referred to India as a tariff abuser as well. And he has called out India's tariffs as obnoxious in nature. And he has essentially brought out 25% tariffs, and there will be additional penalties because of India's relations with Russia. Since India is the largest buyer of Russian oil, as Russia is selling oil at a discounted price to counter the Western sanctions, India also imports most of its defense equipment from Russia. Russia is a key arms supplier to India. Now, this is something that US is trying to target. Trump has openly spoken against India's defense relations and economic relations with Russia, and additional penalties are being imposed on India apart from the 25% tariffs. Then, as part of Western sanctions, we have studied in the last couple of weeks that Indian companies like NISAR, which has substantial Russian investment, they are being brought under the Western sanctions. So this hostile trade policy of the US directly threatens India's national interests. Because see, the US is a critical market for Indian exports. US is amongst the top two trading partners of India. After China, US is our second biggest trading partner. Right? Indian exports to the US is crucial for India's agriculture industry, MSME sector, manufacturing and services. So with these tariffs, India's exports will essentially become unviable, which means this will directly translate into an impact. It will directly result in reduction of the export potential for key sectors, for labor intensive sectors. It could result in job layoffs for thousands and lakhs of employees in the country. That's why you see a big fall in the stock markets today morning as well. India has right now said we are examining the tariffs that US has brought in, and India will do anything needed to protect its national interests. So this places India US on a hostile path. The US is not being friendly in this regard. It's clearly a hostile move. And 25% tariff is unsustainable. Indian exports will become unviable in this case. And India has considered retaliatory tariffs. Most likely, India will come out with retaliatory tariffs very soon. So this raises questions on the very nature of India-US trade relations. And even the entire spectrum of India-US relationship comes into question. Because on one hand, US says India is its most important partner. US has often said that this is the most defining partnership of the 21st century. But now under the Donald Trump administration, it is treating India as a culprit, as a hostile state, and targeting these levies, which could significantly hurt India's economic interests. So if India brings out retaliatory tariffs, which most likely will happen, so that could mark a big deterioration in our ties between India and US. On one hand, the Modi government is already dealing with a challenge from Donald Trump. With regard to India Pakistan, Donald Trump has often claimed that he was the one who mediated the ceasefire during Operation Sindhu, which was recently brought up in the parliament by the opposition parties as well. But government has denied any American involvement, clearly stating the ceasefire was between India and Pakistan. But Trump goes on repeating the claim again and again. And now they have struck a deal with Pakistan as well, where US will get access to critical oil resources and mineral wealth of Pakistan. And they have struck a trade deal with Pakistan, which is a big boost for Pakistani economy. So what message is the US sending out? Is the US on Indian side or Pakistani side? Or is Trump just interested in the business that he does and how it benefits corporate America? So these are fundamental questions that are coming up, which could change the very course of India-US relations. So Sham sir will be conducting a more detailed session on this topic on the American tariffs against India. So please watch out for this session. Maybe by tomorrow, right? There will be a separate video on this where Sham sir will discuss in detail the impact of US tariffs on Indian exports. Next, another important article. Please take a look. This again is related to topic of police reforms. See, under police reforms, one important issue which has always been a priority is the appointment of a DGP, the Director General of Police, who's the highest ranking police officer in a state, who heads the state police force. So previous committees which have dealt with police reforms, like for example, if you take the Malimat committee, right? Then if you take Julio Ribeiro committee, if you take the National Police Commission headed by Dharamveer in the 1970s, all these committees that have dealt with police reforms and criminal justice reforms, they've always called for greater autonomy, greater independence for the police force. Because one major challenge with Indian police is that they are heavily politicized. There's a lot of political interference at the state level, at the local level, even at the national level. Even if you look at central investigating and law enforcement agencies like CBI and Enforcement Directorate, NIA, for example, there are constant allegations of political interference from the ruling party. Same with state governments. Ruling parties are known to interfere with each and every process, right from recruitment to training to postings to transfers, even handling of cases. Everywhere there is political interference. It is this excessive politicization which makes our police forces ineffective. This is what pushes them to achieve quick results, to prove to the government and the media that they have solved the case. And it pushes them to make mistakes. It pushes them to rely on torture, right? It pushes them to violate human rights and abuse the law and the authority, and makes the police a feared force, right? That's exactly the question that was raised by the writer in the previous column we discussed as well. That when you enter a police station, right? Let's say you are a victim of a crime. You enter a police station to secure justice. Would you like to see a police officer who's like someone like a Singham, a brat, a brute who beats up everyone? Or would you like to see a police officer who's someone like, let's say, Sherlock Holmes, who applies methodology, who applies the science of deduction to solve, who's approachable? That's what the writer was asking in the previous article as well. So when it comes to police reforms, one important issue of police reform is about the appointment of the DGP, the head of the state police. So in this regard, there have been a lot of recommendations, but the most important recommendation came from the Prakash Singh case. In the Prakash Singh case, the Supreme Court laid down 7 directives to state governments in order to protect the autonomy of the police force. Supreme Court in Prakash Singh case in 2007 brought out these 7 directives which have to be followed and implemented. They have to establish a security commission at the state level, right, which has a mix of the political executive and the police leadership when it comes to senior appointments, when it comes to assignment of cases and dealing with reforms of the policing system. The 7 directives also dealt with the security of tenure, where police officers in the leadership level are given a security of tenure of minimum 2 years of posting so that they don't have the fear of getting transferred, right? The fear of transfer is what allows politicians to interfere with the autonomy of the police forces. So these 7 directives have been implemented by the states, but in different ways and different forms. They have not remained truly committed to these 7 directives of Prakash Singh case. So when it comes to appointment of DGP, the Supreme Court had made it very, very clear that a certain process has to be followed. States can't appoint anyone as the DGP. States have to send a list of eligible IPS officers based on their seniority, based on their ACR, their annual confidential reports, which contains list of all their performance. States have to essentially send the list to the center, which will forward it to the UPSC. Yes, the same UPSC which conducts your civil service exam. And the UPSC will look at the recommended names, the initial list which has been forwarded. It will look at the criteria, the track record, the merits of these officers, and it will send back a list of 3 names which are considered to be suitable for DGP level appointment. And then the state government, that is the chief minister, will get to pick who will be the DGP. The chief minister will, of course, work with home minister, chief secretary, and the home secretary. But eventually, the decision is left to the discretion of the CM of the state. CM gets to pick the police chief. But initial list has to be sent to the central government, which will forward this to the UPSC. UPSC will look at the list and it will filter out the list based on eligibility criteria, seniority, performance, any negative remarks in their ACR. Everything is taken into account. Their entire track record, right? Their public image, everything is taken into account. And UPSC will send back a list of 3 names which are empaneled by UPSC. And then the state government, the chief minister, can eventually choose 1 out of the 3 and appoint them as a DGP. This is the process which is followed. But it is not properly implemented. The criteria, the eligibility requirements are not followed by state governments as laid down by the Supreme Court in Prakash Singh case. So that's why the central government has issued a notification. In fact, it was notified in April. It's now coming out into the public domain. But this new process was notified by the central government in April itself, where a single window system is being created by the center for appointment of DGPs to state police forces. The criteria required is clearly prescribed by the central government in line with the Supreme Court directives in the Prakash Singh Badal case. Now, one criteria for states to send a list of officers who are eligible to be appointed as DGP. The criteria is that they should have a minimum of 6 months of service left. Minimum of 6 months of service left. And the process should be started 3 months before the vacancy can arise. Before the incumbent DGP can retire. 3 months before that, the process should be started. And the names that are forwarded by the state should consist of only those IPS officers, senior IPS officers, who at least have 6 months plus of service left. This is mandatory. But in many cases, this has been violated. That's why the central government, the MHA, is now creating a single window system with clear criteria and guidelines. And if it is breached, those names would be not considered by the UPSC. Only if state governments meet this criteria, right, when the list that they are forwarding, UPSC will consider them and finally send back 3 names for empanelment, and accordingly state government can appoint them as DGPs. So this is the refined process which is being put in place for appointment of DGPs. Now coming to the prelims section, let's take a quick look at the prelims articles in today's newspaper. The NISAR satellite, the much awaited joint satellite project of ISRO and NASA, has been successfully launched by India's GSLV. GSLV, as you know, is a heavy lift rocket. It is usually used to place heavier communication satellites into the geosynchronous orbit. But for the first time ever, a GSLV rocket has been used to place a satellite, a Earth observation satellite, in the solar synchronous polar orbit. And the NISAR, which stands for NASA ISRO Synthetic Aperture Radar, it carries SAR as its payload. Synthetic Aperture Radar is the primary payload. And it has 2 radars that operate on 2 different spectrums, on the L band and the S band. Each of these radars were built by ISRO and NASA respectively. And the L and S band radars that are used to scan the Earth and observe the Earth, they provide for high resolution pictures And this Earth observation satellite will serve a number of applications. It is considered to be one of the most sophisticated, most high resolution Earth observation satellite ever. It can track any movement, any changes in the surface and even in the subsurface. It's extremely useful to track vegetation, to track crops, to track ice sheets and the melting of ice caps, to even monitor, let's say, during disasters, right? To keep a check of the developments on the ground and assist in disaster management, to assist in resource mapping and planning. So there are numerous applications that the NISAR satellite can offer. Because see, a synthetic aperture radar is very different from a regular Earth observation satellite. Generally, Earth observation satellites carry optical instruments. They carry these optical cameras which produce high resolution pictures. The problem with optical instruments is that they capture high resolution pictures only during daytime. They can't operate during the night. And when there is heavy cloud cover, they can't penetrate the cloud cover. This is where synthetic aperture radar based Earth observation satellites are different. They use electromagnetic spectrum to capture high resolution pictures even during the night and even through cloud cover. In fact, such satellites can have a dual purpose as well, not just for civilian applications like resource planning and disaster management. They can even be used for military applications to generate military grade intelligence, to track enemy movement, troop deployment, and keep a check on the borders, to keep an eye on any infiltration attempts. For example, India, Israel have developed and launched such dual application satellites such as RISAT, the RISAT series of satellites. Even that carries a synthetic aperture radar. But NISAR is only for civilian application. It doesn't have any military application as such, though it can be used. But it is meant primarily for civilian application. It's designed specifically to observe the changes on the Earth's surface and subsurface because of climate change, because of global warming, to keep track of melting ice caps, to keep track of changes in the shoreline because of rising sea levels, to detect ships which might face threats out in the sea, to track subsurface water sources, right, including the groundwater table, etc. So that is the primary purpose of the NISAR satellite which was launched. Next, there's an article that refers to the UNSC 1267 Sanctions Committee. This UN committee is in news because the Resistance Front, the TRF, which is a terrorist organization sponsored by Pakistan, which is a shadow front organization for Lashkar-e-Toiba, it has been listed by the monitoring team of this UN Sanctions Committee. And this is a big development. Please remember, it's the same terror outfit which carried out the Pahalgam attack. Right? The 3 terrorists who were killed in Operation Mahadev the other day. They belong to the TRF, a covert front organization of Lashkar-e-Toiba, which is funded by the state agencies of Pakistan. So, because of India's course of diplomacy and India's efforts in establishing the links between TRF and these terror attacks, recently United States has designated the TRF as a foreign terrorist organization. The US State Department has categorized the TRF as a terrorist entity. Now, the United Nations Sanctions Committee, 1267 Sanctions Committee, its monitoring team has also listed TRF as a terrorist organization which has support from Pakistan. Now, this is a big diplomatic win for India. It again establishes India's point of view, India's argument that Pakistan is a state sponsor of terrorism. It plays host to all these terrorist organizations that are targeting India. Now, the 1267 Sanctions Committee is extremely important. It was set up in the 1990s to mainly sanction Taliban and Al-Qaeda terrorists. That's why it was also known as Taliban Sanctions Committee or Al-Qaeda Sanctions Committee. Later, the same Sanctions Committee has been used to sanction terrorists belonging to ISIS or Daesh, the Islamic State. So it's also called the ISIS or ISIL or Daesh Sanctions Committee. So this committee, which consists of the P5 members and the 10 non-permanent members of UNSC, is the primary platform to impose sanctions on globally designated terrorists. So countries can propose the names of these terrorists and provide enough proof and evidence, And if the 15 members of UN Security Council are convinced, the 5 permanent and 10 non-permanent members, they are the decision makers at the sanctions committee. If they arrive at a consensus, then individuals and even organizations can be listed as globally designated terrorist or terrorist organizations. And once they are listed, 3 types of sanctions will apply against them. All UN members will be obligated to impose 3 types of sanctions on them. One is economic sanctions. They have to freeze all their financial accounts, their assets, which is directly or indirectly controlled by them. Second, they have to restrict their movement. Their right of movement should be restricted, meaning if someone detects their presence, right, those countries, those governments will have an obligation to arrest them, to detain them. And third, they have to restrict their access to arms and weapons. So they can't be allowed to, plan and execute terrorist attacks. These 3 sanctions will have to be applied by the UN member states. One is economic sanctions, freezing of all financial assets. Second is a travel ban. And third is restricting access to arms and weapons. So the TRF has been taken note of by the monitoring team of the 1267 Sanctions Committee. So this makes the path easier for India to get the leaders and terrorists of TRF to get them designated as global terrorists through the 1267 Sanctions Committee. Because we have previously used this platform to designate terrorists from Lashkar-e-Toiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed. So terrorists like Masood Azhar, Hafiz Saeed, Zakir Rahman Lakwi and others, they've all been designated as global terrorists because of India's efforts. Now coming to the next article from Economy, the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation is coming out with a number of new steps, new measures, new initiatives to improve the economic data which is made available. Now, if you look at the GDP data which is brought out by the ministry, currently the base year for GDP data is 2011-12. So right now, there is a need to update the base year as very soon it gets outdated. So Ministry of Statistics Program Implementation is considering to shift the base year to 2022-23 starting from next year. So GDP data that will be released from 2026 February will be based on the comparative data from 22-23, not from 2011-2012. Because eventually these indicators are relative comparisons. The base year plays a critical role in coming out with the relative comparison for this year. So right now GDP base year is 2011-12. This will be upgraded to 2022-23 starting from next year. Then same with Index of Industrial Production, IIP, that tracks the development progress happening in the manufacturing industries. So the IIP base year is also 2011-12. That's the current base year for IIP. Now this will be upgraded to 2022-23. So from next year, April, from the first quarter of next fiscal, if it starts in April 2026, the IIP data will be based on 2022-23 as the base year, not 2011-12. Then there are other big changes coming up as well. The Household Consumption Expenditure Survey, which is carried out, which was recently published as well, that helps track household level consumption. Previously, this was being conducted once in 5 years. But the next exercise will happen once in 3 years, in 2027-28. The duration is being reduced. The Household Consumption Expenditure Survey, which was being done in 5 years, will now happen once in 3 years. Then coming to the main inflation tracker, CPI. The CPI will now also have a new base year. For CPI, the base year was 2012 for tracking consumer price index, the inflation variation at the consumer level. 2012 was the base year. Now this is getting upgraded to 2024 starting from next fiscal. Starting from next year, the CPI will also be based on a new base year. And the ministry is launching new surveys to track travel and tourism and expenditure on travel and tourism. A national household travel survey is being launched and a domestic tourism expenditure survey is being brought out very soon. Now, this will give insights on how much people are spending on tourist activities, both domestic and international. This helps in better planning for the tourism sector as well. And Coming to the new CPI series, which will be brought out next year, new goods are being added into the basket because today our consumption patterns are also changing, right? It's not just fruits, vegetables, or cereals that we are buying. Today, we are investing in OTT platforms on fuel and other transport services as well. All these new expenses will be accounted for in the new basket, which is being created for tracking CPI. And the ministry will even scrap price data from all the online platforms, e-commerce platforms, for example. So even the price from online platforms will be scrapped and it will be used in the computation of the CPI starting from next year. So these are some big changes which are coming up. And again, please note, Sham sir will be taking a special video on this. Sham sir will be coming out with a separate video on this topic, giving you all the details and the detailed explanation for this important topic. Now, coming to the last article, just one update. See, generally, I don't take sports articles, right? I even tell you to ignore sports articles. Even if there are one or two questions, you can completely leave them as well. But UPSC has made a habit of it. Generally, UPSC would not ask sports questions, but in last few years, even 2025 prelims, we have seen UPSC has been asking one or two, maybe two or three very factual sports-based questions. So when there are some big developments, let's cover them as well. There has been history made in India's chess. 19-year-old Divya Deshmukh has recently won the Chess World Cup, the FIDE Chess Championship, and has become the fourth women Grandmaster from India. There were three Indian women who had the Grandmaster title: Koneru Hampi and Dronavalli Harika and R. Vaishali. Right? And now Divya Deshmukh joins their ranks and she registered a tremendous victory. In fact, the Hindu carries an editorial as well today, marking her success and India's rise as a chess power. But see, even now, China has the lead. China, especially when it comes to women chess players, China clearly has a dominant position. But in general, in chess, India has been performing phenomenally well, especially when it comes to the younger talent, be it D. Gukesh and Pragnananda and the others, right? They've all registered tremendous performance in the last couple of years. And now women chess players are also joining the ranks. So in the Chess World Cup that took place in Baku, which was organized by the International Federation of Chess, the FIDE, the final match was between two Indian women. Divya Deshmukh faced off against Koneru Hampi, both from India. Eventually, an Indian woman would have won the title. So Divya Deshmukh managed to defeat the veteran Koneru Hampi, and this youngster has registered a remarkable victory in the rapid tie break with 1.5 to 0.5 score. And she has been crowned as the fourth woman Grandmaster from India. So that's one development you need to take note of, because UPSC focuses even on the opponent, where the event was held, what was the score in that match. All such unnecessary details are being picked by UPSC. So just to be sure, make a note of this, and if at all there's a question, you'll be able to answer them. So this completes my detailed analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper. We have covered almost every important article today, right? I hope you guys have understood everything. And if you like the session, please let me know through your comments. Press the like button and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That's it. Thanks for watching.